Hey there, everybody. Back for part two of our toolbox tour. Yesterday we did our service cart or uh, mechanics cart, whatever, Matco tool cart. Today we're going to look at more of the big toolbox, some more of the fun tools, get into the welding and machining side of what I do. Okay, so in the top, here we have kind of a bit of a junk drawer situation. Um, so carbide burrs for my die grinder. Uh, More attachments for that die grinder. Here we're looking at some wire brushes, temperature gauge or digital temperature gauge. String line is really good when you're doing millwright work. Check if pulleys are square. There's a technique to that. Over here we have my welding dogs used to, when you're doing butt welds, put pressure on stuff to bring it in line so you don't have any high-low gap to deal with. Makes things look a lot nicer. Over here is my welding tools, little hand tools, torch stuff, torch tips, scraper, TIG, MIG tips, a couple pair of welding MIG pliers, torch tip cleaners, strikers. Get yourself a set of these. Miller, and a lot of different brands use these connection points for your stingers. However, a lot of the quick connects tend to be the bigger size, and having a set of these in your toolbox can really help speed things along when you're working with a bunch of different guys in a shop and some dude takes off with something and it's really hard to find replacement parts for that, or replacement connections so you can go do your work. Over here, move over there, it's a copper plate, probably 1/4 inch, 5/16 thick. Use it when I'm TIG welding, heat sink. It also, when you're welding on stainless, if you can press your stainless up to something like this, you don't have to back purge, so it limits the amount of sugaring you have. If you're doing any MIG welding, you need a good scraper. I prefer this style. The blade's a bit thicker. They tend to last a bit better. And here's a deburring tool for sheet metal, stainless and the like, so you don't slice your hands up. In this drawer we have a bearing puller, and then just files. Every welder machinist will have some files, just handy when you need to do stuff. I really do like the triangle files. I've fixed a lot of threads just by quickly running the point of this thing through the threads, knocking down whatever burrs sitting there, keeping stuff from keeping the nuts from not spinning on. Down here's my screwdrivers. Again, we're looking at Mastercraft. I know guys laugh, but it is a lifetime warranty, so I don't have a lot of complaints. Here's a cheap and cheerful T-handle torque set, and in here I bought this a few years back and it bounced around in my welding truck for a long time, but if you can see there, it has the tamper-proof Torx, which comes in handy when you need to have them. This one here, drawer here, welding supplies. So here's my big Bertha cutting torch. I absolutely love this thing due to the size of it. It keeps your hands from getting cut, or not cut, but it keeps your hands from getting really hot. The only downside is that's all it's good for is cutting. Opposed to this other one where you can attach a rosebud to it. You can also attach various brazing heads to it. So this one has a bit more versatility. The other torch is for some serious, when you're getting down to do some serious cutting. Here I got my stinger. A lot of shops anymore don't actually provide you with your stinger, or if you're on site, they've just gone away from it. Too many stingers have walked off with guys, and so the company's just kind of had enough and say, well, you need to provide your own. So have that and a ground clamp in there, bunch of F-clamps, couple Bessie clamps in there. Just things you need when you're fabricating. Over in here, this side of the toolbox, we have pliers. Nothing real special in here. Looking to upgrade these as time goes on. Chain breaker I bought for a millwright job. Those can tend to be quite handy. Fairly standard stuff there. Now, these next couple drawers are some of my favorite drawers because it has my machinist tools in here. Start in the back. So in this little box, we have a light up edge finder you'd use in your milling machine or your lathe. And we have an old school tachometer. And how this thing works is you put this end against whatever's spinning, and it'll cause this to spin. And then you just count how many times that little nub goes past the marker there. Every time it goes past, it's 100 revolutions, and you just keep track. Time it for a minute or 10 seconds, times it by 6. That gives you your revolutions per minute. All right, so here we have a cheap and cheerful deburring tool, nice and handy. Some gauges from when I was doing weld inspections. So this is called bridge cam gauge. I'll probably do a video later on how this thing works and how to use it. Very handy little tool when you're inspecting welds. As a welder, not a bad idea to have, especially if we're working more technical jobs and people are getting picky about how your welds are looking and the profiles and all the rest of that fun stuff. Kind of keep along with that. Fillet gauges. How many welders don't have fillet gauges? It's sad, but it's something that we really should, as welders, be carrying more of. Just make sure your welds aren't undersized when you're doing your fillets. Save you a lot of heartache later on in life, especially if your boss or the weld inspector comes through and makes you redo them all. That's a bad day. So 6-inch steel rule, hole gauge. Tell what size of bolts you have, what size of drills you have. Just handy little thing. I like this little guy. Steel roll. It has a protractor attachment to it. This section right here that's the right angle for your drill bits. So when you're sharpening, you can use that to check. And then it has a 4-inch, 5-inch steel rule attached to it. Broke down into 64ths and 32nds. If you see it there, very handy. It's Craftsman. I'm not sure where I picked it up. I really like it though. This guy actually goes in a drill press. bring it down onto your round bar or pipe or whatever, and it's a centering head. Make sure, get you in the ballpark for making sure you're drilling those lines square. Over here we have some calculators, card calculators for machining and milling. Handy little tools. Make some quick calculations that way. Put this stuff back, go into the other stuff. Feeler gauges. I believe this one has some stuff for spark plugs on it. Just kind of gives you an idea what how much of a gap you'd have. Another feeler gauge. Over here, I have this really old, it's a thread pitch gauge. Lots of different types of thread pitches. Works really well. Sometimes if you can find those really old tools, really handy, very enjoyable to have. And they last. They were built a lot differently than a lot of the made in China stuff that we see nowadays. And I know I tend to not really harp about brand names, and I have a lot of Mastercraft and that kind of stuff. But when I get into my machinist tools, I do tend to spend a little bit more money or hunt for a quality. Most of these things I actually got in a lot off of Kijiji. So going in here, so I have a Mitutoyo dial indicator, good to 1/1000th of an inch. Another Mitutoyo. This is a test gauge, good to 1/10,000th of an inch. Super sensitive. What we have here is a dial depth gauge, Mitutoyo. That's coming to it. There we go. With various pieces so you got a bunch of pieces that came with it. These all screw together. I believe I can get up to a 6-inch depth out of it. So, me personally, I tend to like the dial indicator equipment, not really, or dial tools. I don't really like the digital stuff. It's never, dial stuff is always ready when you go to use it. So Machinist Protractor, made by Fowler. This thing is good to 5 minutes of a degree, which actually goes to 0.08, and a couple more decimals. 825, I believe. If you want to do some accurate angles, that's kind of thing you want to have. My very first caliper, digital caliper, made by Mastercraft. Yay! Wasn't doing stuff that was super precision then. And actually, if you look, the batteries are dead. Just kind of goes more the reason why I'm not a big fan of those. My 1-inch mic, Mitutoyo again. And this is my, and then I got a 2-inch micrometer made by M&W. This thing is old school. Kind of did some wheeling and dealing, picked this one up. Really like it. It's been good to me. It definitely doesn't owe me anything. From the case, this thing looks like it was built in the 70s, but still accurate. My next favorite, more measuring tools, machinist measuring tools. Except for, well, this isn't a machinist measuring tool. Mastercraft digital level. I tend to use this when I am doing weld inspections. Then there's no arguing whether you're in, whether you're out. It just puts the number out, and you can see whether you're within tolerance of the job or not. I'll turn that guy off, put it back. I have literally had this for 6 years, never had to change the batteries. However, I never did put it in my welding truck just because things bounce around and I didn't want to wreck it. Brake caliper, testing your brakes or determining your size of your brakes. Here's a scribe that you would use with a big granite block layout, doing precision layouts. You can also use it as a indicator stand. Moving on, small hole gauge. Got some fun stuff there. I've seen a lot of guys call these wiggler gauges as well. Picked these up as part of the set, or a lot on Kijiji. Never really had a chance to use them yet, but looking forward to it. T bore gauges. So you can see there we can go 1/2 inch all the way up to 2 1/8. Good times. 2 1/8. Oh, up to 6 inches. There we go. Got some calipers. Some of these were older. I picked up from a friend. Some of these are just cheap and cheerful. Little swedge block used to punch small pins out. Here is one of my favorite tools. I love this thing. It's my go-to. So what we have here is a 12-inch Mitutoyo dial caliper. Love this thing. It's clean. It measures well. It's just a really good tool. As you can see, really kind of when I see something, I tend to go with the Mitutoyo. However, American-made Starrett, I hear is really good as well. Moving on, more machinist stuff. Set of parallels, and mic holder. This is a special vise where it will let you you can set angles with it, so you don't have to muck with your milling head, as you see there. Handy little unit. So then we have some magnetic indicator stands, magnetic blocks, and then my Dremel, or not rotary tool. It's not a Dremel, it's a Mastercraft. I actually won this at a Christmas party one year. Hasn't let me down. I have no complaints. Into the bigger drawers, got